All right, everybody, we are back for UFC 299 preview, predictions, and breakdown. UFC 299 O'Malley versus Vera 2 takes place from the Casania Center in Miami, Florida, with a main event rematch that fans have been waiting years for. For the Bantamweight Championship of the world, you have the newly crowned UFC Bantamweight Champion in Sugar, Sean O'Malley, taking on the only man to defeat him in his mixed martial arts career, alongside the only man to defeat him inside the UFC, in Marlon Chito Vera. And aside from that, you have a banger. From the bottom of the prelims to the top of the main card, UFC 299 is a card for the ages. So without any further ado, let's get this started and step into the ring. All right, the first fight up is going to be in the flyweight division. You've got a battle between CJ Vergara taking on Assu Almabayev. I really think this is going to be a great fight, and it's a really solid fight to open up the UFC 299 prelims. The thing with Vergara is he doesn't ever look that great until later on in the fight. Vergara is a midpoint to late round fighter, while a lot of the fighters he faces are early round fighters. Like you look at Daniel Lacerda, who just lost to Edgar Chairez via that first round triangle choke. And it's kind of a similar thing with Lacerda versus, Lacerda versus Vergara, because Lacerda almost finished Vergara in the first round multiple times. I mean, spinning wheel kicks, head kicks, 1-2s, dropped him, rocked him, had him out. The ref didn't stop it. He comes back, gets some takedowns, and eventually just ground and pounds him into the floor. Now, is beating Daniel Lacerda a great thing? No, the guy doesn't even have a win inside the UFC, but it shows that CJ Vergara, you can get up on him early, you can take him down, you can rock him, you can beat him up on the feet. He'll find a way to come back. It was the same thing against Kaitlyn Rodriguez. He lost early, got hurt, got rocked, got into some scrambles, and then was kind of able to outpace Rodriguez later on in the fight. I believe if you look at that fight, I think Vergara ended up winning that via decision, even though, like I said, early on it was a tough fight for him. Yeah, so he ended up winning via split decision against Kaitlyn Rodriguez. But the thing with a guy like Vergara is he gets put in bad positions. Bad positions after bad positions after bad positions. But he's a decent scrambler. He knows how to scramble on the ground. He knows how to reverse out of positions, get on top, land ground and pound. And like I said, he has the cardio to keep it up for 15 minutes. That's always a good thing, especially against a newer guy inside the UFC like Assu Almabayev. He's new to the UFC, but he's got an 18-2 record, winning his first fight in the UFC via a rear naked choke, I believe in round 2. Against Ode Osbourne. Now, is Ode Osbourne really the most impressive fighter? No, but he does have a split decision win over Charles Johnson. He has some decent wins in his career. He's been finished before, but we kind of knew that Ode Osbourne was going to be at a grappling disadvantage against a fighter like Almabayev. But what I've seen from him is I like his striking on the feet. He uses his jab. He uses that rear hand to high guard. He throws good 1-2s. He uses good movement, kind of in and out, a lot of lateral movement. And he's not a guy where he needs to get the wrestling in order to be successful. He doesn't mind staying on the feet. Now, I think a striking match with CJ Vergara wouldn't go as well as if he uses his takedowns, grappling, and looks for submissions and ground and pound. I think the path of least resistance for Almabayev here is to get those takedowns, tire out a guy like Vergara, and kind of tire him out into the second round, into the third round, second round, third round, and get a late ground and pound or submission finish. I do think Almabayev is going to get the job done here against Vergara, but you always got to be careful because Vergara doesn't look great early, but he comes on late. So if Almabayev really has a great first round, rocks Vergara, tries to submit him but can't get him out of there, kind of blows his gas tank, Vergara might be a good live betting opportunity to take him in the second and take him in the third round rather than to bet him before the fight. I think before the fight, the look is to take Assu Almabayev, and that's going to be my pick. I am going to take Assu Almabayev to defeat CJ Vergara via a submission. I think he is going to be able to get those takedowns. I think he is going to be able to control from that top position, land some hammer fists, land some ground and pound, look for some submissions, and eventually just tire out a guy like CJ Vergara and find an opening to get a submission. Vergara is not going to quit. Vergara is not a quitter, but he has been submitted before. He has been out-grappled before, and I feel like that's what we have here in Almabayev. I think he's technically better on the ground, technically better in the scrambles, technically better from the top position, and when he goes for submissions, he doesn't rush it. He is very technical with the way that he sets up his submission. So I'm going to go with Assu Almabayev to defeat CJ Vergara via a second-round guillotine choke submission. I think he is going to grab that neck and lock up that guillotine, and I think he does get the sub against Vergara. But like I said, if it's a close first round, or I'm sorry, if it's a dominant first round from Almabayev, but you could tell he's starting to get tired, you might want to live bet Vergara in the second and third round. But the pick's going to be Assu Almabayev, round 2, guillotine choke submission. All right, up next, we've got a battle in the middleweight division between Michel Pereira and Michal Oleksiejczuk, the battle of Michel versus Michal. I think that this is a very intriguing matchup, but I do think the more well-rounded mixed martial artist overall is Michel Pereira. I think he's faster on the feet. He has more weapons and when he uses his kicks, his elbows, his Superman punches, flying knees. He's the more well-rounded, more versatile fighter. Michal Oleksiejczuk is a fighter who is very meat and potatoes. He can grapple. He can get into the top position. He has vicious ground and pound from the top. That's one thing that Michel Pereira is going to have to worry about if he starts to get tired, if he pushes that wrestling pace a little bit too much and ends up on the bottom position. I think Michal Oleksiejczuk can land big shots from the top and put away a fighter like Michel Pereira. Now, Michel Pereira is a guy that we've never seen get put away inside the UFC, but when I look at this fight stylistically, I think the better boxer is Michal Oleksiejczuk. He's a southpaw. He has a very good straight left, a very good overhand left, good right hooks. But the more technical, the crisper striker is Michel Pereira. Now, that's not saying much because even though he's crisp, even though he has a good 1-2, good uppercuts, a really good jab, good head kicks, good flying knees, and even can incorporate his wrestling more now than we saw earlier in his career, I still think that he could be in some danger if he gets into the pocket against a guy like Michal Oleksiejczuk. If Pereira wants to win this fight, he wants to stay just on the outside of the punching range and right at the edge of the kicking range. You don't want to get into the pocket. If he gets into the pocket with a fighter like Oleksiejczuk, I know Oleksiejczuk was getting dominated earlier in the first round against Chidi Njokuani. I mean, head kicks, elbows, knees to the body. Almost got finished. Chidi Njokuani got tired. Michal Oleksiejczuk just kept pressuring forward, and broke him within one round. It was a similar situation with Cody Brundage. Like early, he looked decent, got taken down, got grounded and pounded, and got knocked out from the top or from the bottom. With Michal Oleksiejczuk landing ground and pound from the top inside of his guard. I think that this fight is kind of a coin flip. This isn't a fight I would bet on because I think if they do get into those pocket exchanges, inside the pocket, in the clinch range, in boxing range, I think Pereira could be in trouble. Oleksiejczuk is really, really dangerous with his boxing. The overhand lefts, the 1-2s, the right hooks, and knees to the body. But really, it's his boxing that's his bread and butter. But I feel like he's too one-dimensional of a fighter to beat a guy like Michel Pereira. I like Michal Oleksiejczuk more as an overall fighter, but I think Pereira's kicks, the front kicks to the body, I think there's going to be a lot of teep kicks, front kicks, push kicks to the body, trying to land knees as Oleksiejczuk closes the distance. He's going to have to worry about striking off the break in terms of watching out for Oleksiejczuk's power, because off the break in the clinch is where I think Oleksiejczuk can hurt and potentially knock out a fighter like Pereira. But I do think over the 15 minutes, the fighter with more weapons, the fighter who can resort to their grappling if they need to, and the fighter who just has way more opportunities to win and is much better at the kicking range of the fight, if he can get outside of boxing range, is Michel Pereira. So I'm going to take Michel Pereira to get the job done. I'll go Michel Pereira via I'm actually going to take a submission. I have a feeling that the submission might materialize here for Pereira because we know that Oleksiejczuk does not have the greatest defense when it hits the mat. That's usually against really high-level grapplers, but I think if Pereira kind of pieces him up on the feet, he could get Oleksiejczuk to shoot a bad shot and get a submission. So I'm going to go Michel Pereira, second round rear naked choke submission against Michal Oleksiejczuk. But this isn't a fight I would bet on, but I do think Pereira is the more well-rounded fighter overall. All right, the next fight up is in the light heavyweight division between Iwan Cutelaba, the Hulk, taking on Philipe Lins. We know what Cutelaba is going to be. It's big, heavy overhands, hooks, uppercuts, and looking to get the opponent down to the ground. He's going to look to grapple. He's going to look to get takedowns. He's going to look to push Philipe Lins up against the cage, going to look to take his back, going to look, set up submissions. But at the end of the day, I think this is a spot where Philipe Lins wins like 75% of the time. He's much cleaner on the feet. He's much crisper. He does have some issues with his grappling. You can't deny that, but he's won fights via Marcin Prachniow, who's very difficult to beat on the feet. He got a knockout in the first round against Ovince St. Peru. He won a unanimous decision against Maxime Grisham, who's a very technical striker and does look to incorporate his grappling as well. He lands 3.59 significant strikes per minute, but also absorbs 3.73. So it's kind of a wash. He lands a little bit more, but he still gets hit. He lands just about 2 takedowns per a 15-minute fight, but doesn't really look to set up submissions. And he's got a 100% takedown defense rate. The 100% takedown defense rate against a fighter like Ion Cutelaba really speaks the biggest difference in this fight for me. Because I think if Cutelaba strikes with Philipe Lins, Lins is going to be a lot faster, he's going to be a lot more powerful, and I think he's going to have a lot more volume in terms of output with the boxing on the feet. He's not much of a kicker, but he likes to keep it on the feet, he likes to box, and he will put shots together. He was a guy who was in the UFC, left, went over to the PFL, and then came back to the UFC. I think Cutelaba can win this if he uses his wrestling, but that's kind of the only way I see Cutelaba winning, is pushing Philipe Lins up against the cage, holding him up against the cage, and winning more on control time, because with a 100% takedown defense rate, even though a lot of guys aren't shooting heavy on him, which could affect his overall takedown defense, I do think he'll be able to stuff most of the takedowns from Ion Cutelaba. And on the feet, I think Cutelaba is kind of a sitting duck at this point in his career. I think Lins is going to put those combinations on him. He's going to get that jab in his face. He's going to land the right hand. He's going to land that left hook. He's going to put the 2-3 together, the cross hook, the uppercuts, the overhands. And I think he's just going to overwhelm a fighter like Ion Cutelaba and eventually get him out of there via TKO. I'm going to go with Philipe Lins to defeat Ion Cutelaba via second round TKO. I just can't trust a fighter like Cutelaba. I know he's powerful. I know he has really good wrestling, really good grappling, decent submissions, but Lins has never been taken down in the UFC, and I'm going to stick with that. So give me Philipe Lins to defeat Ion Cutelaba via second round TKO. Next up, you've got a battle in the bantamweight division between Pedro, the young Punisher Munhoz, taking on Kyler Kai Matrix Phillips. This is a really, really interesting matchup, and I'm really surprised by how heavy of a favorite Kyler Phillips is. Is he the faster fighter on the feet? Yes. Is he the more well-rounded fighter in terms of mixing up his grappling to his wrestling, or his grappling to his striking, boxing to kickboxing and back and forth? Yeah, he is the more well-rounded fighter. He's the faster fighter. He can mix up the wrestling and grappling if he wants to, but I don't think that's something he's really going to want to do against Pedro Munhoz. But the last time we saw Pedro Munhoz as a really heavy underdog, he fought very competitively with Marlon Vera, who's fighting Sugar Sean O'Malley in the main event for the championship. And a lot of people thought that fight was 1-1 going into round 3. Some people thought Munhoz was up 2-0. And I had a bet on Munhoz by decision in that fight. But at the same time, I think Kyler Phillips is going to be able to dictate the range a lot better than most fighters. But at the same time, if you go back and you watch the Ione Barcelos and Kyler Phillips fight, Kyler was piecing him up early, dropped him, hurt him, and then he kind of tired himself out and got dominated pretty much in that third round. The first 2 rounds were clearly for Kyler Phillips, but in the third, he was getting backed up, he was getting pressured, and all the movement, the lateral movement, the in and out movement, the fast twitch muscle fibers of Kyler Phillips were kind of slowing him down later in the fight. I think Pedro Munhoz is going to be that guy where, yeah, he's going to get hit. Yeah, he's going to get hit with a lot of shots, a lot of body kicks, a lot of low kicks, a lot of 1-2s down the middle, but his chin does hold up, which makes this a fight of Kyler Phillips getting ahead on the scorecards early and then kind of falling apart late in round 3 and maybe getting a greasy split decision. This fight could easily go to a split decision because I think it's going to be early Kyler Phillips with the combinations, the head kicks, the 1-2s, the takedowns potentially, off of the strikes. spinning wheel kicks, the jab. He uses the jab, a lot of good lateral movement. And I do think it's going to be hard for a pressure fighter like Munhoz to really slow down and kind of box in Kyler Phillips and let his combinations go. But later on in the fight is where I think Munhoz could potentially take advantage if he gets on that calf kick early, jab, low kick. He's very good with his low kicks. He's good at returning kicks. If he gets kicked, he'll brace, come back with a combination and land a kick on the end of it. Really likes to punctuate his combinations with kicks. I think that this fight is very close, and I think the line is off, but I do think the fighter who's going to have more output, the fighter who's going to put more things out there, and the fighter that's going to look better in terms of the judges' scorecards is going to be Kyler Phillips. He's 11-2 as an MMA fighter, 20-8 with 2 no contests for Pedro Munhoz, but could have arguably beat Marlon Vera in his last fight. Came through as a big underdog against Chris Gutierrez, dropped him multiple times in that fight, had the bigger moments. The boxing of Pedro Munhoz is crisp, it's clean, it's kind of looping, but he throws it in a very crisp way, very tight kind of, sets up his combinations well, overhand rights, left hooks, 1-2s down the middle. The hooks on the exit and the overhands are probably his biggest weapons in this fight, along with the low kicks on the lead leg of Kyler Phillips. But with the stance changes, with the ability to wrestle, I think Kyler Phillips is going to get this done. He's going to have more output. He's going to land the bigger strikes. But later in the fight, I could see Munhoz taking over and making it a split decision. I think the best fight, or the best bet in terms of this fight, is probably the fight to end by a split decision. I think that's a very good look for this fight, along with another fight we're going to talk about later on the card. But I do think Kyler Phillips is going to be more active. I think he's going to have more output. He's going to have the higher variety of strikes. And I think he's going to win by a split decision. So give me Kyler Matrix Phillips to defeat Pedro, the young Punisher Munhoz, via 29-28 split decision. Munhoz is very durable. I don't think he's getting put out here. Up next is a phenomenal fight in the lightweight division between the former lightweight champion and Rafael dos Anjos taking on Mateusz Gamrot. I'm going to be honest, I don't really understand why this fight is taking place, but I still feel like it's going to be a great fight. 23-2 on the side of Gamrot. Gamrot coming off that TKO due to injury against Rafael Fiziev in a UFC Fight Night main event. RDA, I believe, is coming off of a loss to, let me see. Oh, that's right. Vicente Luque. In that UFC Fight Night main event, he lost via decision. But I think that this is a fight where it's kind of just a passing of the torch moment. Do I think RDA is the cleaner striker? I do think that, in layman's terms, but at the same time, I think a lot of people discredit the striking ability of Gamrot on the feet. He moves very well laterally, good in and out movement, good lateral movement, and he was competitive with Rafael Fiziev in their last fight. I mean, he was kind of out striking Fiziev early in the fight before that injury happened. The jab, the 1-2 down the middle was landing very good against Rafael Fiziev, and, the straight punches were beating the punches of Fiziev. I think RDA was losing the fight against Rafael Fiziev, but, he was pushing him up against the cage, trying to control him, but he couldn't really do anything with him in terms of the striking game, and eventually he got caught with that stance switch overhand and knocked out in the 5th round. But I think RDA is kind of a fighter where, yes, he's a great fighter. Yes, he's got a very good skill set. But I think he's kind of past his prime at this point. And that's part of the reason I picked Luque, because I think an in-prime Dos Anjos would beat a Luque. But at the point when they fought, it wasn't a prime Dos Santos, and I feel like Luque was kind of coming into his own. And I think Gamrot is a fighter where he's got the striking to hang with RDA on the feet. He probably doesn't have the power that RDA has, but RDA isn't the most powerful striker either. And we've seen multiple times in Rafael dos Anjos' career, he's been taken down, he's been controlled, he's been out-wrestled, he's been controlled on the mat. Now, he's not really been submitted, but he's been controlled and he's been knocked out before. I think if anybody in their career can submit and finish a guy like RDA on the mat, it's a guy like Mateusz Gamrot. He's one of the best chain wrestlers in mixed martial arts. Head on the outside single, head on the inside single, head on the outside single to a double leg, cut the corner, take the back, get back up, body lock to double leg, back to a single, back to a double, back to a crackdown. He mixes up his takedown attempts so well, and he's comfortable enough on the feet to not be, panic wrestling and shooting for his life when it comes to the striking on the feet. He's competent enough. Now, I do think RDA is the better striker. I think the left body kick's going to be there for RDA against Gamrot. The 1-2s down the middle. We've seen Gamrot get rocked. We've seen him get dropped. But at this point in RDA's career, I just don't really see a way where he doesn't get taken down, where he doesn't get controlled, where he doesn't get potentially submitted or grounded and pounded by Gamrot. I know a lot of people are expecting a submission finish for Gamrot. I think that if he gets a finish here, it's probably going to be a ground and pound TKO after getting the takedowns, after controlling from the top. I mean, like I said, I think Gamrot would give Islam Makhachev a run for his money in terms of the grappling exchanges. And I know he lost to Beneil Dariush, got dropped, got rocked. But I think the more times you run that fight, the more times a guy like Gamrot probably comes out on the winning end of it. He was a favorite, a pretty big favorite against Beneil, got dropped, couldn't really go into those grappling exchanges, but Beneil's a great grappler as well, and the one hole we've seen consistently with RDA's game is getting taken down. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, most of the times when he's getting out wrestled and getting out grappled, he's getting out grappled at 170 in the welterweight division against guys like Kamaru Usman, against guys like Colby Covington, against Luque, and that is a definitely something to look at, but this is one of the best grapplers in that lightweight division, and he fought another, probably the best grappler in the lightweight division in Khabib Nurmagomedov and got ragdolled. Now, I'm not saying Gamrot's on the level of a Khabib in terms of all-out wrestling and control time, but in terms of chain wrestling, putting takedowns together, mixing up the striking to the grappling, I believe he's a more well-rounded fighter and has a more well-rounded skill set than Khabib did at the time that they fought with RDA and Khabib, but that was a long time ago. I do think RDA is the better striker. I do think he's more technically proficient on the feet, but I don't think he's going to really have a ton of time to strike on the feet. I think it's going to be a lot of takedowns, chaining takedown attempts together, control time on the top for Gamrot, looking to set up submissions and eventually just tiring out RDA and getting a second round ground and pound TKO stoppage. There is definitely a possibility that this fight goes to a decision and Gamrot gets the nods on the scorecards, but honestly, I see a finish more times than I don't for Gamrot, and although a lot of people are expecting a submission, I think it's going to be a ground and pound TKO. So let me get Mateusz Gamer Gamrot to defeat Rafael dos Anjos via a second round ground and pound TKO. I think this is just way too much for a fighter like RDA at this point in his career. Gamrot's on the up and up, and RDA's on the decline. Up next, we've got a battle in the women's flyweight division between Kaitlyn Chookagian taking on Maycee Barber. I believe these two have fought before. Let me just double check that. Let's see if we check Maycee Barber's fight history. Didn't she beat Chookagian? Maybe they didn't fight. Maybe I'm wrong. I think I'm wrong because I do not see it. Okay, they didn't. Maybe I just kind of got confused there for a second. But Chookagian or Kaitlyn Cerminara versus Maycee Barber. I think this is a fight where Barber probably wins it. I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time breaking this fight down. Cerminara or Chookagian is a fighter who likes to point fight. Keep it at a distance. 1-2, side kick, front kick to the body, knees to the body. 1-2, skate on the outside, cross, lead body kick. 1-2, question mark kick. She likes to point fight. And that is going to work against a fighter like Barber who's going to walk forward, who's going to stalk her, who's going to try to put her on her back foot, who's going to try to knock her out. That is going to work. But at the same time, I think Barber's just coming into her own at this point in her career. I think she's walking forward. She's not afraid to get into those striking exchanges. She's more comfortable in the striking exchanges, and there's a massive power difference in terms of the striking between Barber and Cerminara, aka Kaitlyn Chookagian. I think this is going to be very similar to the Chookagian and Jessica Andrade fight where, Chookagian's going to look good at certain points or Cerminara is going to look good at certain points, but eventually just that walk forward, pressure style is going to get to Cerminara and she's going to get clipped up against the cage She's going to get hit with a big overhand right, a big left hook, a big straight shot down the middle, and then Barber's just going to hurt her and not let up on her and just kind of bum rush her. And I think she's going to get her out of there late. It could be like late first round, honestly. I think once Barber starts to smell the blood in the water, the performance against Ribas really impressed me from a fighter who fights to a split decision a lot in Maycee Barber and gets some decisions that she probably shouldn't have gotten, like the decision against Miranda Maverick, but I think she can beat a fighter like Chookagian or Cerminara. Sorry, I've said this wrong like 10 times now. I think she can beat a fighter like Kaitlyn by closing off that distance, cutting off the circling, closing the range, and kind of just piecing her up once she gets into that pocket. So I'm going to go with Maycee Barber to beat Kaitlyn Chookagian by via TKO. I'm going to go with a second round TKO as she kind of closes off that range, gets her up against the cage, and, fires away with big combinations. So I'm going to go Maycee Barber, second round TKO over Kaitlyn Chookagian, a.k.a. Kaitlyn Cerminara. All right, up next in the heavyweight division, you have a battle between Curtis Razor Blades, the number 5 ranked heavyweight, taking on the number 7 ranked Jailton Almeida. This is a fantastic fight. It's a really intriguing matchup because I feel like a lot of people are sleeping on Curtis Blades. I know he's the slight favorite in terms of the betting line, so not as many people are sleeping on him as I believe, but I feel like a lot of love is going to be given to Jailton Almeida. A lot of love is going to be given to a guy who had Derek Lewis on the mat for pretty much 22 out of 25 minutes and couldn't finish him. Now, in one hand, that does give credit to Derek Lewis's defensive jiu-jitsu, his ability to kind of hold position. Even though he didn't really do much off of his back, he was able to stay out of submissions. And, Almeida's a guy who does have good striking. He likes to use that front kick to then pull back, close range, and get a takedown. And there is going to be a big speed advantage, I believe, for Jailton Almeida, but I think there's a big technical advantage with the striking of Curtis Blades. I think the boxing of Blades is heavily underrated and heavily overlooked, but he was able to knock out Chris Daukaus, who was known as one of the best boxers in the heavyweight division, with a big right hand right down the middle. A 1-2, bang. Caught him on the chin as he was stepping in and knocked him out. Blades was never known as a boxer, but his striking has gotten him much better in his UFC career, and I feel like he has the the defensive wrestling to stop a lot of the grappling exchanges. He has a 33% takedown defense rate, so it doesn't look that great on the numbers, but Jailton Almeida has a 55% takedown accuracy rate with a 75% takedown defense. Now, the thing is, Almeida's probably going to give up some takedowns so that he can work off of his back, but he's more of a top-side grappler than he is a bottom-side grappler, and I don't really see him having as much success with taking down a guy like Curtis Blades and looking to submit him on the mat. If he does get a submission, I would suspect it's probably an arm triangle, because he might get an inside or outside trip and then end up in either the mount or the half guard, and then can work for that arm triangle from that position. I don't necessarily see it there being a situation where Blades is going to give Almeida his back. I think it would be, like I said, him being on top and looking to set up an arm triangle, or potentially, I think it would more than likely be an arm triangle if he was going to get a submission. Probably an arm triangle from the side control, or not side control, from the half guard or from the full mount, or just raining off ground and pound if he does get Blades on the mat. Now, if he gets Blades down, it's a problem, but that's a very tough ask. And on the feet, yes, Almeida can strike, but at the same time, he's not a seasoned striker. Now, neither is Curtis Blades, and like I said, I do think there's a speed advantage. At least I think there's definitely a kicking advantage for Almeida, but a speed advantage for Almeida as well, but there's a boxing advantage for Blades. I feel like this fight is going to go the way of Curtis Razor Blades, but we also have to think about the durability of Blades. He's been chinned, he's been rocked, he's been wobbled so many times, and that chin isn't really far off from getting cracked again. I know he got knocked out by Pavlovich the last time, who was one of the hardest hitters in the division, but Pavlovich got knocked out by Tom Aspinall in the first round, so we know that he doesn't have the greatest chin either, so maybe if Blades would have landed on Pavlovich before Pavlovich landed on him, maybe we could have seen Blades hurt Pavlovich if you do think about it in that way. I do think the more well-rounded fighter is Jailton Almeida. I think the faster fighter is Jailton Almeida, but I think the stylistic matchup here favors a guy like Curtis Blades, because in order for Almeida to really have the fight take place in his wheelhouse, he's going to have to get takedowns and he's going to have to control Blades from the top position, and I don't see Blades giving up a ton of takedowns to a fighter who isn't the best wrestler, but he does have decent chain grappling. I don't think he's going to have an easy time taking down Blades unless he gets to the body lock and works for inside and outside trips. But at that point, I still think it's going to be pretty difficult for him to take him down. I'm going to side with Curtis Blades here. Early on, I did a breakdown on my YouTube channel, and I picked Curtis Blades. I'm going to side with the same pick here. I'm going to go with the number 5 ranked Curtis Blades to beat the number 7 ranked Jailton Almeida. I just feel like he's going to be able to get it done. And I think the boxing is going to be the biggest advantage here for Curtis Blades. But you do have to worry about the chin concerns of a guy like Curtis. But I don't think Almeida likes to get hit. And he's not that comfortable on the feet unless he's the one dictating the pace. So I'm going to take the number 5 ranked Curtis Blades to defeat the number 7 ranked Jailton Almeida. I'm going to go with a second round TKO. I think he's going to hurt him, wobble him, jump on him, and eventually just control the jiu-jitsu fighter with superior wrestling positions after he hurts him on the feet with his boxing and get a ground and pound TKO. So we're going the number 5 ranked Curtis Razor Blades via second round TKO over Jailton Almeida. And for the first fight on the main card, we have the former UFC bantamweight champion in Petr No Mercy Yan taking on the number 7 ranked contender in the division, coming off a huge decision win over Chris Gutierrez in the Kung Fu Kid Song Yadong. Petr Yan is ranked number 4 at bantamweight, but he's 1-4 in his last 5 fights. Song Yadong ranked number 7. Records for each fighter are 16-5 for the former champion in Yan and 21-7-1 for Song Yadong. I honestly think this fight is about as 50-50 as you get. The one thing I will say is that I think the superior technical striker is Petr Yan, but I think the faster fighter is Song Yadong. I think the faster puncher, the faster striker overall, in terms of speed and power, is Song Yadong. And I think the biggest thing you have to worry about with Petr Yan is that he comes out and is traditionally a slow starter. He's a guy who kind of lets the fight come to him, and he does his best work in 5-round fights. The only thing is, he wasn't really able to execute that 5-round pace against a fighter like Merab Dvalishvili, who basically 50-45, 50-44'd the former champion, because he never allowed Petr Yan to get into his rhythm. The one thing Song Yadong is going to allow is, since he's more of a methodical striker but does have explosive power, I feel like the power could scare off Petr Yan and kind of force him to continually reset his striking game, whether it's switching between orthodox and southpaw, southpaw and orthodox. He's going to constantly force him to kind of change up his game, but I feel like it's easier for a guy like Yan to get into the flow state against a striker in Song Yadong, who, yes, can use his wrestling, but I think for the most part is going to give Petr Yan what he wants, which is executing a striking matchup. And I don't necessarily think there's too many guys in this division that can go back and forth and comfortably win a 3-round or 5-round fight against Petr Yan on the feet. Now, Merab technically outstruck Petr Yan, being known as a wrestler, but that was because of the constant forward pressure and the takedown threat. And even when he controlled him in the striking realm, he didn't get a ton of takedowns. Merab didn't get a ton of takedowns. You know, Petr Yan did stuff a good majority of the takedowns that Merab shot. And in the first fight against Aljamain Sterling, he stuffed almost every single takedown. And then obviously that illegal knee kind of just set the tone for a downward trajectory in Petr Yan's career. So you really do have to look at it like this. If it's a 5-round fight, I favor Petr Yan about 70% of the time. In a 3-round fight, I favor Petr Yan numerically, maybe 55-45. So the difference between the 3 rounds and the 5 rounds is a really big difference in how you're going to have to break down this fight, not just stylistically, but technically as well. Because the bigger, more impactful shots are probably going to come from Song Yadong, but at the same time, a fighter like Yadong, who's going to be engaging in that boxing range, is going to give Petr Yan the ability to use his best weapons, which is his stance-changing overhand left or straight left going from orthodox to southpaw, the lead hook into the lead body kick, the cross into the rear head kick. the 2-3 into the, spinning wheel kick. He's got lead head kicks where he can go cross into the lead head kick, jab into the lead head kick. Very good, like I said, hooks into the same side kick to the body. Good low kicks, good boxing combinations, really solid, short, crisp technical punching. And against a fighter in Song Yadong, Yadong isn't nearly as crisp of a boxer as Petr Yan is. He's a little bit more loopy. He has more power than Petr Yan, but he's a little bit more loopy in terms of the way he sets up his strikes, his overhands, his hooks, his uppercuts. He's kind of been the same fighter for the majority of his career, and one of the only people we saw really control him in the striking game was a fighter in Kyler Phillips, who dominated the fight and ended up winning via decision, but hurt him on the feet, took him down, really just controlled him. And, we talked about Kyler Phillips earlier on this card. The fight with Corey Sandhagen, yeah, he lost via doctor stoppage, but it was a fight where he was very competitive with a guy like Sandhagen. Petr Yan fought Sandhagen, and yes, it was a competitive fight, but I feel like we knew that Petr Yan was the winner. And if we're looking at similar opponents and things like that, I do think that I have to lean ever so slightly towards Petr Yan because it's going to be a style of fight where he's going to be able to execute his game plans and he's going to be able to land the sharper counters in between the big shots of Song Yadong. But the power of Yadong is something that can cut Petr Yan, that can rock him, that can hurt him, and that can make the rounds be scored very close because we know, like we said earlier, that Yan is a slow starter, and on the judges' scorecards, unless it's like a dominant second half of the second round and a dominant third round from Petr Yan, I think that it's going to be a very close fight, and it probably ends by split decision. I think if you're looking at this fight from a betting perspective, the best way to bet on it would be the fight to be won by a split decision, because the second fight with Aljamain Sterling was a split decision. The fight with Merab was unanimous, but that was, a dominant performance, and we've never seen Yan get dominated like that before. The fight with Sean O'Malley was I believe it was a unanimous decision, but it should have been, no, I think it was a split. It was a split decision in that regard. So Yan always fights very close, and yes, he can seal rounds with takedowns at the end of them. He does have wrestling. I think if anybody's going to use the wrestling in this fight, it's probably going to be Song Yadong, but I don't think he's going to have a lot of success in taking down Petr Yan, who's coming off that loss to Merab Dvalishvili, so we know that his defensive wrestling is going to be at a higher level than it was before. So since the wrestling probably doesn't play a factor unless it's Yadong using takedowns to push Petr Yan up against the fence and hold him there, because I do believe him to be not just the more powerful fighter, but the stronger fighter, I think it's going to be a very close fight, but I do think that Petr Yan will edge out a decision, but it's going to be very close. I don't even feel comfortable betting on Petr Yan, and I love putting money on Yan because he's one of my favorite fighters, but this is a case where you have to let logic overtake your emotion, and I think the best bet is fight ends by a split decision. But I'm going to go Petr Yan to land the cleaner shots, to land the straighter, cleaner punches inside the looping shots of Song Yadong, and to be able to push back Song Yadong and, execute that pressure. He probably gets hit with some big shots. He probably does, get tagged a couple times. And I think if there's a knockout in this fight, I think it does come from the side of the Kung Fu Kid in Song Yadong because of the speed and power that he possesses. I believe his punch is a lot harder, but I think Yan is a lot cleaner. So I'm going to pick the cleaner fighter, but like I said, if there is a finish, I think it comes on the side of Song Yadong. But give me Petr No Mercy Yan to defeat Song Yadong, the Kung Fu Kid, via 29-28 split decision. But not a fight I would be comfortable betting on, and I'm a big fan of both guys, so I don't want to see either one lose, but I'm going to side with No Mercy in this one. The next fight up in the welterweight division is a battle between the number 4 ranked former title challenger in Gilbert Dorino Burns, taking on the man undefeated in the UFC with a 16-2 professional record, former Contender Series alum in Jack Della Maddalena. Maddalena is coming off a decision win over Kevin Holland, while Gilbert Burns is coming off a unanimous decision loss to Bilal, remember the name Muhammad. I love this fight. Mainly because I'm a big Jack Della Maddalena fan. I've never been the biggest Gilbert Burns fan, but the one thing I will say is that from start to finish, this guy's going to bring the fight. But I think in this case, he's kind of up against it with a fighter in Jack Della Maddalena. A lot of people are talking about the changing of the guard in certain fights on this card, and I think that this is one of them. I think that the more powerful striker is Gilbert Burns. I think the better wrestler is Gilbert Burns. I think the better jiu-jitsu artist, clearly Gilbert Burns. The better grappler, clearly Gilbert Burns. The smart thing would be for Gilbert Burns to close the distance with some wide shots and then use takedowns, cage wrestling, pushing Jack Della up against the cage, getting inside and outside trips, and controlling Della Maddalena on the ground. Controlling a fighter who we saw get controlled by a late replacement in Basil Hafez and win a split decision. I think he won it unanimously, but it was basically a split decision because of all the takedowns, because of all the control, but the striking was clearly on the side of Della Maddalena. I think Della Maddalena is the perfect fighter to TKO a guy like Gilbert Burns, who does have decent striking. He has a good jab, he has a good left hook, but it's going to be the cleaner, sharper striker. I think this is similar to what we talked about with Song Yadong and Petr Yan, where Song Yadong is the more powerful striker. He might be the faster fighter, but the cleaner, more technical boxer is Jack Della Maddalena, and in that fight it would be Petr Yan. The cleaner, more technical striker is Jack Della, and a guy who's clean, has technical boxing, who uses a good jab, who switches stances orthodox and southpaw, who puts his combinations together, I feel like can outstrike a fighter in Gilbert Burns. I know that he went back and forth with Khamzat Chimaev, but at the same time, Chimaev does have technical and clean striking, but it's nowhere near the level of a Jack Della Maddalena in terms of technical ability and technical acumen when throwing combinations on the feet. I think Della Maddalena is going to work those combinations. The jab's going to be stuck in the face of Gilbert Burns, and if you remember, if you go back and you watch the Kamaru Usman and Gilbert Burns title fight from, I believe it was UFC 253, somewhere around there. I could be wrong on the number, but the one way that Kamaru Usman won that fight was pull counter right hands and the jab from orthodox and the jab from southpaw in the 1-2. It was the straight punches beating the looping overhands, the looping hooks, the big uppercuts. The straight punches are what won Kamaru Usman that fight and caused him to retain his title. We've talked about straight punches beating looping punches. It's a similar situation here, where yes, I do think the more well-rounded fighter is Gilbert Burns. I do think the fighter with a higher level of competition is clearly Gilbert Burns. The better wrestler, Gilbert Burns. The better grappler, Gilbert Burns. The fighter with a higher ability to finish the fight on the ground is Gilbert Burns. But Gilbert Burns is a fighter who doesn't really use his wrestling. Now you can say that and then you can counter me and say, well, he used it against Wonder Boy, and that's what caused him to win the fight, was forward pressure, takedowns, and top control. And that is true, but I feel like Della Maddalena is going to have better takedown defense than Stephen Thompson, and maybe I'm contradicting myself because he got taken down a bunch of times by Basil Hafez, but he was able to consistently work his way back up to the feet and didn't really give up a ton of top control time, but he would give up the takedowns. I think this is a coming out party for Jack Della Maddalena. He got dominated by Bilal Muhammad, did Gilbert Burns, and I kind of expected it. I thought Chimaev was going to knock him out, but he didn't knock him out, but he did win that fight via decision. But man, Gilbert Burns is going to bring the fight. There's definitely a chance that Gilbert Burns catches Jack Della on the feet and rocks him. I think the path of least resistance would be a heavy wrestling game plan, pushing Della Maddalena up against the cage, getting takedowns, controlling from the top, looking for ground and pound, and looking to set up a submission. I think it's definitely live that Burns does submit a fighter like Della, but I think the technical boxing, the ability on the feet to land clean, precise punches, great counters, really solid combinations, changing stances, and just the overall much cleaner technique in the boxing realm of this fight is what I believe is going to win Jack Della this fight, because it was the boxing. It's usually the boxing and the striking that gives Burns the toughest time when the fighter is more clean, crisp, and technical with their shots, and I think that's what we have here in JDM. So I'm going to take Jack Della Maddalena to finish Gilbert Burns. I'm going to go Jack Della Maddalena via a second-round TKO. I think that jab's going to be sticking in the face of Gilbert Burns. I think Burns is going to get rocked and wobbled. I do think Burns lands a couple good shots on the feet, and he definitely has the ability to rock and put out Della Maddalena with the power that he possesses. And like I said, big experience advantage on the side of Burns. And if he uses his wrestling, he can do very well in this fight. But I don't think he's going to use his wrestling. I think he's going to stay in the striking realm. And I do think that he's going to get pieced up, caught with big counters, and just the combinations of Della are going to be too much. So I'm going to take Jack Della Maddalena to defeat Gilbert Burns and move to the top 5 in the welterweight division with a second round TKO. Up next, we move to the featured bout of the evening in the welterweight division with the UFC debut of the former Bellator fighter in Michael Venom Page taking on Kevin Trailblazer Holland. This is an amazing fight. The number 13 ranked fighter in the welterweight division is Kevin Holland. I feel like this fight can go either way. I feel like there is going to be a finish in this fight, and I think it's going to be a brutal knockout from either side. But if there is a submission, I think it comes from the side of Kevin Holland. Because we've seen him rock fighters, hurt fighters, cause them to panic wrestle, and then lock up that Darce choke. He's very good at locking up the front headlock and locking up that Darce choke. He did it against Michael Chiesa, and he did it against Tim Means. And I think this fight with Michael Page is another fight where we could see him catch Michael Venom Page with a big shot, rock him, front headlock, snap down, and go right into the Darce choke and get a sub. I think if Holland wins this fight, it is probably by submission, and I think if Michael Venom Page wins this fight, it's by a TKO. If you look at the stats, they have an equal height at 6'3", and then the reach is going to be, I don't have the list, alright, sorry, I don't have the stats from Michael Venom Page. 79-inch reach. Okay, so he has a 79-inch reach, does Michael Venom Page, compared to a 81-inch reach. So we're going to be at a disadvantage in terms of reach for Michael Venom Page by, I believe, 2 inches. And I think that's going to make a difference. But I also think that the way that Michael Page fights, I feel like Kevin Holland is a fighter that's going to play right into the style of Michael Venom Page and allow that counter-striking style to really showcase tenfold in his UFC debut. The UFC aren't dumb. They know that Kevin Holland's going to bring the fight. They know that Kevin Holland's going to come forward. They know that Kevin Holland's going to get in the face of a fighter like Michael Page. And it is a big, tough test for a fighter like Page. It's one of the toughest fights of his entire career. But Kevin Holland is not the cleanest striker. He has a very solid jab, and he's got a really good 1-2. That right hand down the middle can catch Michael Page and knock him out. But he has really awkward angles which he can strike from, and I feel like if he gets into exchanges with Michael Page, it's going to be those awkward punches, the back fists, the downward hammer fists, the big elbows, the spinning back fist that's going to knock out a fighter like Michael Page. Or kind of like how he knocked out Jacare Souza, off of his back with a big right hook, hurt him, jumped on him, and then TKO'd him with big ground and pound. Kevin Holland is very wild, and Michael Page is more crisp, more technical, has that traditional martial arts style of striking with the side stance, moving in and out, lead leg side kicks, lead leg roundhouse kicks, 1-2s down the middle, lunging in and out, kind of like a snake. He's going to try to be the snake charmer, or he's going to try to be the cobra to Kevin Holland, and Kevin Holland's going to try to be the snake charmer and catch him in a trap. But if you look at Kevin Holland's career, the closest fight that we've seen for a fighter like a style like Michael Page, at least in terms of Kevin Holland, was Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. And he did hurt Stephen Thompson early, but then he got dominated, he got his arm broken, and he eventually got TKO'd late, and I believe the 4th round, he got TKO'd and just kind of got pieced up. Now, I believe that Stephen Thompson is probably the better, cleaner, more traditional karate fighter, but I think the danger level on Michael Page is just so much higher than what we saw with Wonderboy, but he also is going to put himself at risk, which is going to play into the hand of Kevin Holland. So I think in one hand, this is a more favorable matchup than the Stephen Wonderboy Thompson fight for Kevin Holland, because he's going to have a fighter who will come forward, who is a great counter striker, but who will take risks and kind of, get himself into the fire. But at the same time, he's going to have a fighter where the counter striking is not going to only be faster than Wonderboy Thompson, but it's going to be a lot more powerful and really have that kind of detonation of a bomb effect where if he gets caught with a big counter, he could get knocked out right away. I do not see this fight going the distance. I think probably the best bet right now is the under 2.5 rounds at plus 135 on DraftKings. I took that today, actually, when they opened up the lines for the unders and overs. I feel like that's a good bet. But I feel like this fight is really hard to break down, but I am going to go with the UFC debutant in Michael Page. I am going to go with Michael Venom Page because I feel like I said, stylistically, I think Kevin Holland is going to play right into the counter-striking of Michael Venom Page. That big lunging counter right hand, the big head kicks, the counter flying knees, the forward movement of Kevin Holland. Yes, he has really long, straight punches. Yes, he has a very good 1-2 down the middle. Yes, he is going to be wild and awkward and kind of crazy, but I think the counter striking of Michael Page, a fighter like Kevin Holland who moves forward and kind of goes wild when he puts his combinations together, plays into that counter striking on the back foot of Michael Page. So I think if there is grappling in this fight, it's probably from Kevin Holland hurting Michael Page and then wrapping up his neck and getting a sub. But if this stays a purely striking matchup, I'm going to go the guy who's got 16 finishes out of his 21 wins, 13 KOs, 3 submissions, and has only been finished 1 time in his entire career. Now, Kevin Holland has really only been knocked out 1 time as well, but it was against a fighter who's very similar to Michael Page, but doesn't possess the danger factor, the power, and the explosiveness along with the speed that Michael Page has. So I think when you put this all together, I'm going to go with the UFC debutant in Michael Page to land a big counter right hand as Kevin Holland closes the distance and knock him out cold. I'm going to go with a first round knockout for Michael Venom Page over Kevin Trailblazer Holland in his UFC debut, and I think he's going to set the UFC on fire. I really think that this is a good matchup for Michael Page, and although there are a lot of danger factors, although Holland could definitely knock out Michael Page or submit him, I would lean more towards a submission or a club and sub. I do think the style of Kevin Holland with the forward movement and the long striking is going to play into the counter game of Michael Page. So give me Michael Venom Page via a first round TKO over Kevin Trailblazer Holland and breaking himself into the top 15 in his UFC debut. And now we move to the co-main event of the evening, a 5-round bout in the lightweight division where one word can describe this matchup: violence. It's going to be the number 4 ranked Dustin, the Diamond Poirier, taking on the number 12 ranked God of War, Benoit Saint Denis. Poirier is actually ranked number 3. I know I just said ranked number 4, so, forgive me for the correction. But you have Dustin Poirier coming in as a plus 142 underdog to the minus 170 favorite in Benoit Saint Denis. I think Saint Denis is like a minus 198 favorite right now, close to a 2-1. And I think a lot of people are going to jump on the underdog pricing for the former interim lightweight champion in Dustin Poirier. But I really, honestly, truly believe that this fight is going to be a changing of the guard. I do believe that the better boxer is Dustin Poirier. I think the better, cleaner overall striker is Dustin Poirier, and he's a very good counter boxer as well. And Benoit Saint Denis is going to walk forward. He's going to get in the face of Dustin Poirier, and he might get his block knocked off. Poirier might catch him with a big counter right hook and knock out a fighter like Benoit Saint Denis. But they are both going to be in that southpaw stance, and they are both going to have the same weapons: the back power left hand, the back power left kick, and the lead counter right hook. The biggest difference in the game, when it comes to this fight, I think is the back power body kick of Benoit Saint Denis. We saw him in the fight against Ismael Bonfim land 5, 6, 7 kicks in succession, just walking forward and not really respecting his opponent. Now, I hope he comes in and respects Dustin Poirier, but the one thing is you can't over-respect a fighter like Poirier. I think a guy who's going to beat Dustin Poirier is a guy who's going to possess the power to land a big knockout, but a guy who's not going to allow Poirier to get into his rhythm and come forward and just kind of try to put the fight and bring the fight to him. You saw it in the fight with Dan Hooker, like they went back and forth, and yes, Poirier got the better of that fight, but there was points where, Dan Hooker almost got that TKO at the end of the second round, I believe it was, where he landed vicious hooks up against the cage, hooks to the body, hooks to the head, and then landed a big knee in the clinch right as the round ended. If there's 10 more seconds in that round, Dan Hooker gets the TKO win over Dustin Poirier. And it's because he was a fighter who was able to, embrace that war and get into that firefight. Benoit Saint Denis is going to come forward. He's going to put Poirier on the back foot, which is going to open up the counter striking and the counter boxing of Poirier. But with the boxing, the wrestling, the takedowns, and the kicking game of Benoit Saint Denis, I think Saint Denis has too many weapons and possesses too much power for a fighter like Poirier to really get into his rhythm. Now, Poirier is going to be in a fight with Benoit Saint Denis. Like, he's going to embrace that war, and like I said, has very good counter boxing to the point where Saint Denis might come forward recklessly, get clipped with a big counter right hook, and get knocked out. He might come forward recklessly and get clipped with a big 1-2 right down the middle, and he might get hurt and rocked and then put away. The one thing you can't have with either of these fighters is you cannot afford to get hurt. I feel like the first fighter to get hurt in this fight might be finished. I really believe it because Saint Denis has finishing instincts where if he hurts you, he's going to go for the kill. He's going to look for elbows. He's going to look for knees in the clinch. He's going to look for takedowns. He's going to look to land ground and pound. He's going to look to submit you. He's going to look to land those body kicks. He's going to look to land head kicks. And with Poirier, if he hurts you, he's going to put 5, 6, 7, 8 punch combinations together. The biggest difference here is the volume striking of Poirier compared to the overall forward pressure and aggression of Benoit Saint Denis. I believe Saint Denis has more power in his kicks, and I think that's where the biggest difference lies. The biggest advantage for Saint Denis, I think, is his offensive wrestling and his kicks to the body. The left kick to the body, the 1-2, the cross into the left head kick, striking off the break in the clinch, as Matt Frivola, catching him on the exit from the clinch and landing a big left head kick. I mean, I think that the power striking is on the side of Saint Denis, but I think the technical boxing, the volume striking, the combination punching comes from Poirier. I think the better offensive wrestler, the stronger wrestler is Benoit Saint Denis, but I think Poirier could hold his own, but he's never been the best defensive wrestler. He's been out-grappled and controlled by guys who aren't really known to be superior wrestlers in certain regards. And I'm not talking about Khabib, but certain fighters have been able to control him in the grappling positions more than they probably should have. But I really think that this fight, when you look at it on the stats, it's a 2-inch height advantage for Saint Denis, a 1-inch reach advantage. You look at significant strikes, Benoit Saint Denis actually lands more per minute, 5.53 to 5.49. Striking defense, 44% for Benoit Saint Denis to 53% for Dustin Poirier. So Poirier is going to be the better defensive fighter, and with his counter boxing, he probably could catch Benoit Saint Denis, hurt him, and knock him out. I don't think this fight goes over 3 rounds. I don't even know if we make it to round 2. With the way that this fight's going to play out, I think we might see Saint Denis be a little bit more reserved, but at the same time, I think the aggression and the forward pressure is what's going to win him this fight. So he can't be too much on the back foot because he's going to allow Poirier to get into a rhythm. And with a fighter who has the forward pressure, the boxing, the combinations, and the technical boxing of Poirier, you can't really allow him to get into a rhythm. So what Benoit Saint Denis has to do is get in his face, rough him up, make it dirty, make it nasty, and break that ability to build a rhythm. I'm going with another changing of the guard. We talked about it earlier with Jack Della Maddalena and Gilbert Burns. I think we see it again here in the co-main event. I'm going to go with Benoit Saint Denis to get a first-round knockout over Dustin Poirier. Now, first round is pretty bold because we never see Poirier really get finished in the first round, but he got knocked out in the first round against Michael Johnson. He got knocked out in the first round against Conor McGregor, and he didn't get knocked out in the first round against Gaethje. I believe it was round 2, but I think Benoit Saint Denis has the ability to knock out Dustin Poirier early if he gets in his face and makes it dirty, but is also a little bit more defensively responsible than other fights, because if he just comes forward with his chin in the air and just overall disrespects the game of Poirier too much, he's going to get caught with that counter right hook, he's going to get caught with that counter straight left, and he's going to get hurt, and he's probably going to get put away, because once Poirier rocks him, he's going to throw 10, 15, 20, 25 punches until he eventually puts him down. So I believe either fighter could get the knockout here. I think there is going to be a knockout coming from either side, whether it's Poirier or Saint Denis, but I'm going to go with Benoit Saint Denis to land a big head kick and knock out Dustin Poirier in the first round. We've seen Poirier be susceptible to head kicks. We saw him get knocked out with a head kick against Justin Gaethje. Now, that was in an orthodox stance. These fighters are going to be similar stances, but I believe that lead head kick, or potentially catching Poirier as he goes to land that stance switch overhand right and kind of backing up, allowing him to go forward to switch from southpaw to orthodox and catching him right as he executes that switch. It's going to be difficult, but I do believe Saint Denis can catch him with a big head kick, hurt him, and put him down. I'm going to go with Benoit Saint Denis. I just think the power and the physicality and the aggression is going to be too much for a fighter like Poirier, who at this point in his career is what age? Let's see. 35 years old. Benoit Saint Denis is currently 28. So there's a 7-year younger advantage, a 7-year age advantage for Benoit Saint Denis in this fight. And I think that the younger, less tested fighter, not in terms of, yes, he's less tested in terms of competition level, but he's also less tested in terms of wars. But he's been in a bunch of wars as well, so you can't say that super confidently. But, he hasn't been put away as many times as Poirier. At 35 years of age, coming off a head kick knockout against Gaethje, I think Saint Denis has the forward pressure, the aggression, and the knockout power, and the basically I don't give a fuck attitude to put away Dustin Poirier early. So I'm going with a bold prediction here. I'm going with the God of War, Benoit Saint Denis, to crush the diamond under his pressure and get a first-round knockout in the co-main event of UFC 299. Benoit Saint Denis, first-round head kick knockout. And now we move to the main event of the evening for the UFC Bantamweight Championship of the World in a rematch from UFC 252 back in August of 2020 between the reigning, defending UFC Bantamweight Champion at 17-1-1 in Sugar, Sean O'Malley, taking on Marlon Vera, the number 5 ranked fighter in the UFC's bantamweight division. Yes, number 5 ranked fighter in the bantamweight division, and the only man to hand Sugar Sean O'Malley a defeat via a first round TKO, like we said back at UFC 252 in Marlon Vera. O'Malley versus Vera 2. I'm going to be honest with you guys. When I thought about this fight originally, I was heavily on the side of Sean O'Malley. I feel like he is the more improved fighter from the first time they fought. I feel like he's gotten so much better from the first time that they fought, and I feel like Vera hasn't really gotten much better in terms of technical advancements and technical skills. I think the skill advancement is on the side of Sean O'Malley, but at the same time, originally I was so heavily on O'Malley to win this rematch. And don't get you wrong, let me not fool you. I picked Marlon Vera to knock out Sean O'Malley in their first fight. Go back and listen to my podcast. I'm probably one of the only people who picked Marlon Vera as the underdog to beat the undefeated Sugar Show, the undefeated fighter coming off the Contender Series, the first fighter off the Contender Series to win a world title. I was the first guy, I believe, or one of the only guys to pick Vera to win that fight and win it by knockout. But going into this fight, before I went back and watched the tape, before I really thought about it, maybe 3-4 months ago when this fight was announced, I was just like, man, I don't see a reason why O'Malley doesn't get this W back. He's advanced. He's fought better competition. He's gotten much better. But then I really looked at it and I thought, and honestly, guys, I would not be surprised if we got a new bantamweight champion this weekend. Because you have to look at it this way. Sean O'Malley wins fights because he's the faster striker, he's the more technical striker, he switches stances between orthodox and southpaw, but mainly because he has that touch of death. He has that knockout power that can put fighters' lights out. And that's the biggest advantage. He has the equalizer. But how are you going to use an equalizer against a fighter who hasn't ever been finished before? He's been dropped and rocked. He got rocked by Brad Pickett early in his career. I think people forget that. But then he ended up coming back and landing a head kick. But Marlon Vera is going to come into this fight with a lot of confidence. And he's going to come into this fight knowing that although O'Malley has made really heavy advancements in his game, he still knocked out Sean O'Malley. He put him to sleep. And the fact that O'Malley still in his head believes that this wasn't a real loss, the Sugar State Athletic Commission said that I didn't lose, I'm still undefeated. I get the mindset, but at the same time, he's not coming to grips with reality that not only did he lose, he lost because of a calf kick that attacked the peroneal nerve before the calf kick was really a big thing. The first time we really saw calf kicks affect the fight was in the second fight between Demetrius Johnson and Henry Cejudo back at UFC 2, what was it? UFC, I can't think of it off the top of my head. But that was one of the first times we really saw calf kicks affect a fighter in a fight. But he's still not believing that he lost. And he lost because of the calf kicks of Marlon Vera. And who is to say that he can't calf kick him again? Now, I feel like O'Malley's going to be very light on the feet, very in and out. And he's going to step in on those calf kicks and try to land the 1-2. He's going to try to step in and counter with the right hand. Going to try to step in and counter with front kicks probably. But man, I look at this fight and I think, why can't Marlon Vera knock out O'Malley again? There's really no reason why he can't do it again. There's no reason why he can't. Has O'Malley gotten better? Yes. Is he the more improved fighter? Yes. But he's going up against a guy who's never been knocked out, against a guy who can go 25 minutes, against a guy who keeps his power late in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round, against a fighter who, since he's never been knocked out, probably is going to have the bigger fight-affecting moments with the strikes that he lands, but could easily get outpointed over 25 minutes. The question is, can O'Malley outpoint and outstrike Marlon Vera for 25 minutes without getting clipped with a big left hook, without getting hit with a big head kick, without getting the calf attacked again and getting attacked with calf kicks and slowing down? Because what you have to remember is that he's had issues with his foot and with his calf before in the Andre Sukumtat fight early in his UFC career. I believe it was either that fight or the Terrion Ware fight. One of those fights he had issues with his calf. And Marlon Vera was the second fighter to attack it, and he won the fight because of it. Who's to say he can't have those issues again when we've seen it multiple times in his career? Now, O'Malley's going to be a lot faster. I think he has more weapons than Marlon Vera. I think he's going to be a lot more fleet-footed than the first time out. But it's going to be the case of, can Sean O'Malley fight perfect for 25 minutes against a fighter who he's more than likely not going to get out of there? Can he survive 25 minutes against the Michael Myers of the bantamweight division without getting hurt, without getting rocked, and without getting hurt, wobbled? I don't think he can. I don't think he can. I don't think he can survive 5 rounds against a fighter who, number one, has knocked him out already, who, number two, is coming into this fight with very little publicity, very little exposure against one of the biggest stars in the company, but against a fighter who mentally hasn't really accepted the fact that he lost the first time. I really don't like the fact that he hasn't accepted that he lost, because in his mind, he never lost. And I get the mindset of, I'm still a winner, I'm still undefeated, mentally, but in reality, you're not. And I don't think he's come to grips with the reality that he lost the fight because of a technique called a calf kick that hit the peroneal nerve, hurt his foot, stopped him from being able to move forward, push off, or move back effectively, really stifled his movement, fell on the ground, and got TKO'd with an elbow and big hammer fist. Marlon Vera needs one big shot and one big exchange to put away O'Malley. And Marlon Vera is a fighter who's never been knocked out before. I don't think O'Malley can fight perfect for 25 minutes. I think the calf kicks are going to be a problem again. I think he's going to get pieced up for the majority of the fight. I do. I think O'Malley's going to piece him up with big shots. But I think late in that 3rd, late in that 4th, in that 5th round, in those last 3 rounds, 3, 4, and 5, I think that's when Vera's going to start to slow down O'Malley, continue to walk forward, and O'Malley's going to get a bit discouraged that he hasn't put him down or knocked him out yet. And he's going to slow down. He's going to throw stuff he doesn't want to throw. And he's going to get hit with those calf kicks again. And he's going to get hit with a big left hook from Marlon Vera. He's going to get hurt. And Vera's going to pour on the pressure and get a late TKO. I'm going Marlon Chito Vera to become the new UFC Bantamweight champion via a 4th round TKO against Sugar Sean O'Malley, handing him his 2nd loss in his pro MMA career and being the only man to defeat Sugar Sean O'Malley in pro MMA. This time, it's for the Bantamweight Championship. So give me and new UFC Bantamweight Champion of the World in Marlon Chito Vera via a 4th round TKO. All right, that's going to be it for my UFC 299 preview, predictions, and breakdown. UFC 299 takes place this upcoming Saturday, March 9th, live on ESPN Plus pay-per-view. This card is going to be amazing. You can get this podcast on my YouTube channel, and it's mainly going to just be YouTube from now on because the audio podcast doesn't really get a lot of traction. But you can donate to the podcast via the PayPal address in the description, and I'm going to be reopening my Patreon very soon and adding content to there where you'll be able to subscribe for betting tips and extra insight into the MMA game that I'm going to provide for you. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit a spinning back elbow on the notification bell. I'm your host, Double M. This has been UFC 299 preview, predictions, and full card breakdown, and let's enjoy the fights this Saturday.